Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast, where we provide you with your weekly diagnosis of everything fantasy football. Whether it's season-long leagues, dynasty, DFS, or sometimes even IDP, we got you covered all year long. Let's do it. Let's get to it. Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast. Merry Christmas Eve to those who are celebrating. I'm your host, Jon Jeune, at the real Jon Jeune _FF. It is Tuesday, December 24th, 2024, 7:06 a.m. Eastern. Apologize to the folks who usually view this live. Sorry for my tardiness this morning. Just had some technical difficulties that I had to work around, but we manage, we adjust. And good morning to all of my folks who are tuning into this, coming fresh off a semifinals win into a bid for a fantasy football championship. So shout out to you guys. It was a crazy week with a lot of big time performances. We had some, Jonathan Taylor making up for his week 15 mishaps. We had James Conner, who came through with a big game before leaving with an injury. So at least you guys got that from him. Jameson Williams with a big time game. Lamar Jackson doing what he usually does. It was a big game from a lot of big names. Chigakonkwo with a big game as well. It was just, the usual suspects. Chuba Hubbard, how could I forget him? Big time game from him as well. Jaden Daniels with, an amazing performance. Jahmyr Gibbs stepping in as the RB1 for Detroit. Bijan Robinson having a big game. Jalen McMillan, having a flex-worthy performance there. It was, quite the day. I feel like I'm missing James Cook, not Trey McBride. He was the opposite of that. Tajay Spears, Sam Darnold, Justin Jefferson, just to name a few guys that had some really big time performances. And then there was some guys that were on the disappointing end of that, right? Josh Allen, right, did not have the game that many thought that he would. Trey McBride did not have the game that many hoped that he would, right? Brian Robinson, it was a complete flop. Puka Nacua, underwhelming performance by him, right? It was just all around, Patrick Taylor, right? We flocked to him as a potential flex option. And he totally pooped the bed, right? So, it was a mixed bag for sure, but that's fantasy football. That's sometimes the way that it goes, right? There's nothing we could do about it. But if you did make your fantasy football championship, let me hear about it, man. Tweet at me, hit me up on IG, throw it in the comments if you're watching live right now, right? I want to hear about your bids to win a potential fantasy championship here. And if I was a small part of that, also let me know, right? If there was something I did to help you out, whether it was during the matchup show or a waiver pickup, or we've been doing streaming defenses as well. So during the waiver show, so if I helped you out in any way, I definitely would love to hear that. You could also leave it in the comment section of if you're watching on podcast or on YouTube as well. So also just make sure while you're there, you subscribe, right? Whether you're watching on YouTube, you're watching live on YouTube, you're watching on X, if you're watching on IG, watching on Spotify, just hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button, whatever it is you got to do to stay tapped into this show, right? To this program, I should say. Um, and if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, any of those podcast platforms, yeah, make sure you comment, like, subscribe. Make sure you are tapped in to this program because you're not going to want to miss a thing, right? This right here is the Week 17 Fantasy Football Waiver Show. I would love to say this is the last waiver show that we'll do, but um, some of y'all are still playing Week 18. I don't know who it is, but I know there's a few y'all out there playing Week 18. I just want to say, stop it. Talk to your commissioner. Tell them there's no need for this. No need whatsoever. And if you are the commissioner, then you find the mirror, the closest mirror, you look in it, and you tell yourself you will no longer commission leagues with a Week 18 playoff because it doesn't make as much sense as a Week 17 because it's going to be just based on information, right? So will not be the last waiver show. Friday will not be the last matchup show. We will be, discussing all that stuff as it pertains to Week 18. But again, it'll be just information based mostly. If there's some clinching scenarios that take place in Week 17 and some of these teams don't have anything to play for, we'll just be reading tea leaves at that point. But this waiver show does matter, right? It's Week 17. While some teams have clinched the playoffs, they're still fighting for seeding. So at a minimum, we're going to get some big involvement from the usual suspects in Week 17. And if you are playing in your fantasy football championship, there's a possibility you're looking at one of these guys, right? And, just some gamesmanship, right? Like maybe you don't need to stream a quarterback, but maybe your opponent does. Maybe they have Jalen Hurts. And so, they're looking to, potentially, they're looking to potentially pick up another quarterback just in case, right? Like maybe you block them, right? And maybe Jalen Hurts is a bad example because we don't know if he's going to play, so you could go through all this trouble of blocking them, and Jalen Hurts does play, and then you just have this extra quarterback sitting there. But play the situation out, right? And it could be a defense, right? Streaming defense, like this is the time, right? You don't need those stash running backs, those handcuff running backs anymore, right? Like we're not stashing. There's no more weeks after this, so we're not stashing the Kamani Vidals of the world, hoping that they get an opportunity mid-game this week because you're not inserting them into the lineup mid-game. So, I would drop all those backup running backs, those backup wide receivers that I'm not starting, backup tight ends, things like that, and start picking up these defenses to block your opponent. Start picking up a quarterback to block your opponent. Maybe your opponent lost James Conner, so then maybe you want to hold on to all the running backs, right? So take a look at your opponent's roster. Take a look at what it is that they might be trying to do. Put yourself in their shoes. Say, okay, well, if this was my team, like, what would I be thinking, right? And try to get in their head and block them from making some of these transactions. That's why we often say, leave in a little emergency fund in the waiver, for the fab, so you can, block an opponent, right? I don't have a lot of fab left in my league, so I'm not blocking anybody. I have like $5, I think, is the most that I might have in a league right now in terms of fab. But some leagues that's enough to block somebody. Some leagues it's not, right? So, always make sure you have at least $1, right? So maybe your opponent used up all their fab and you can outbid them for something, right? Okay, that is my rant. Just wanted to talk about that a little bit. But let's get into the waiver show. I want to make sure y'all can see this sweater, like not all festive for you guys. Yes, it is make sure y'all can see it. Dragon Ball Z. That's Vegeta. tis over 9,000. Tis the season, you know it. So if you're watching live, if you're not watching live, you can jump over to the YouTube after, and you could see it, the sweater I'm talking about. But yes, this is my idea of getting festive with this sweater and this Christmas hat. This side says nice, so you can imagine what the other side says. Anyway, let's move on to the quarterbacks, and let's talk about the Carolina second-year quarterback Bryce Young, available in 93% of Yahoo leagues, coming off the best fantasy game of his career with 27.1 fantasy points. Young made his impact on the ground with 68 rushing yards and his third rushing touchdown in 4 weeks. He's matched up against a Tampa Bay defense that allowed 290 passing yards and a touchdown to Cooper Rush on Sunday Night Football in Week 16. And just 4 weeks ago, Bryce Young threw for 298 yards and a touchdown, while also adding a touchdown on the ground against this same Tampa Bay defense. So this is a nice spot here for Bryce Young if you've been streaming the position or need a fill-in due to potential injury this week. Next up, Pittsburgh quarterback Russell Wilson, available in 54% of Yahoo leagues. It's possible, I'm pretty sure it's pretty probable, but it's possible that George Pickens makes his return to the lineup on Christmas Day. If that's the case, I think that increases the upside for Russell Wilson, who in the last 3 games without Pickens averaged 167 passing yards per game versus averaging 271 passing yards per game in the previous 6 games with Pickens in the lineup. So that's 100 more yards per game when he's had George Pickens versus when he hasn't had George Pickens. And now he's facing off against a Kansas City defense that, outside of the Jameis Winston debacle in Week 15, has been relatively friendly to the quarterback position. Moving on to running back, again, we're not going to be talking about any of these guys that potential handcuffs, any of these guys that high upside stashes. There's nothing like that this week, right? The closest we have to a high upside stash is somebody spraying an ankle in practice, or getting a hamstring injury or something like that. But those aren't guys. If that happens, I think we can try to quickly react to the news, right? Like, I don't think we plan for midweek injuries. If something like that happens, like, you just we'll just react as the news happens. But this is all about guys that, if you need somebody to fill in for a starter, right? Maybe you are the James Conner manager, right? And maybe you are looking for another option at the running back position, right? Then you can go to these guys here. So that being said, let's talk about LA Chargers running back Gus Edwards, available in 52% of Yahoo leagues. Scored twice last week on 16 opportunities, rushing for a season high 68 rushing yards on 14 rush attempts. His 14 rush attempts were 9 more than teammate Kamani Vidal. So he was obviously the clear lead back against Denver. He has a matchup on deck against the New England defense that has allowed no less than 17.3 PPR points to an opposing RB1 in their last 4 games. Including at least 96 rushing yards to an opposing running back in their last 3 games. Again, I'm not really big on Gus Edwards. I don't know, a lot of people, there was a lot of discourse about him, whether he should have been started last week, whether he should have been on your bench. Honestly, I would have benched Gus Edwards in any leagues that I roster him. It just didn't. There was, the upside is relatively low there. But coming out of last week, where it was clear that he was the lead back, whereas in previous weeks he'd kind of been close to a 55-45 split with Kamani Vidal, 60-40 split, maybe even. He's definitely separating himself a little bit more. Now, I wouldn't look too much into that performance, right? Two goal line rushes in a career, was it a career high or a season high? It was definitely his longest run of the season. I think there was something about whether that was the longest run in the last several years or something like that for Gus Edwards. Um, but I take it with a grain of salt, but the matchup here definitely is a nice one. Moving on to Las Vegas, let's talk about Las Vegas running back Alexander Madison, available in 52% of Yahoo leagues. Saw 19 opportunities on Sunday, totaling 56 yards and a touchdown. He's not efficient by any means, but in a solid matchup with some volume and goal line opportunities, he's definitely worth a look as a flex play. And New Orleans has allowed double-digit PPR points to an opposing running back in to an opposing RB1 in 3 consecutive weeks, make that 4 consecutive weeks after Monday Night Football. And they even allowed, I want to say double digit PPR points to the backup running backs. I can double check that, but I'm pretty sure that happened last night as well. Um, but yeah, so Alexander Madison is in a halfway decent spot here against this New Orleans rush defense. So again, not excited to start Alexander Madison, but there's definitely a case here with the volume and potential goal line opportunities. Next up is Las Vegas Raiders running back Amir Abdullah, available in 77% of Yahoo leagues. Abdullah has carved out a nice role for himself with 13 opportunities on Sunday, which he converted into 85 total yards and a touchdown. His receiving usage makes him a nice, safe option with 13 targets and 12 receptions over his last 2 games. Abdullah is probably the more exciting play ahead of Alexander Madison. Now, Las Vegas was in a little bit of some negative game script. Um, these last 2 weeks, rather, actually, between the Atlanta game the week before and the Jacksonville game. So when I think about that, that probably could be why they were in a negative game script. Only Las Vegas was a negative game script, only really in the after the first quarter. But Nope. First quarter, and then then the third and the fourth quarter as well. So, yeah. So that makes me think. Okay, it was like, is he somewhat game script dependent? Like, if they have a lead, what's that going to look like for Amir Abdullah? And last I checked, this game, the Raiders were 2.5-point dogs against New Orleans. I don't know if that changed after last night's game. But Abdullah should have a role here. He's definitely much more efficient on his opportunities. It's just that, is he going to get 13 opportunities in a game that they could be potentially leading for a good chunk of the game? And yeah, Vegas is now down to 1.5-point dogs, down from 2.5. So this game probably be a pick 'em by the end of the week. So it could go either way. Next up, we have Kendre Miller, available in 54% of Yahoo leagues. He wasn't wildly efficient yesterday with his touches, but he's got a matchup against the Raiders, which is, a decent one at best, at worst, I mean. So, did see a decent amount of volume yesterday with, filling in for Alvin Kamara, was part of a little bit of a committee. I think that he probably would see more work if there was a closer game script, right? Only saw 10 opportunities, which he totaled 31 total yards. So those 8 rush attempts is not really what you would want to see there. But if they're playing in a much closer game with some positive game script, I think that plays to Kendre Miller a little bit more. And you'll see less of like a Jamal Williams or a Jordan Mims in the game, and more of a larger workload for Kendre Miller. Moving on to the Arizona running backs. So James Conner, rather, he had suffered an injury mid-game, a knee injury. And I've kind of been joking like all year that James Conner injury was going to happen. It was going to happen. It was going to happen. And sure enough, it looked like it wasn't going to happen. And of course, it happens in week 16. But at least, like, by the time he had suffered that injury from a fantasy perspective, right? You never want to see somebody get injured. But if you're gonna get injured, if you're gonna get hurt on my fantasy team, you definitely do it how James Conner did it, right? 117 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown, 4 receptions for 49 receiving yards, 26.6 PPR points. I can live with that. It doesn't completely tank your day like Jalen Hurts did for a lot of managers. And again, never want to see a guy get hurt. Wish them all the best. I'm not sitting here saying Jalen Hurts is a bad person because he got hurt and my fantasy teams may have suffered, or your fantasy teams may have suffered from that. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. But this happens. Injuries do happen. It's part of the game. It's the nature of the beast. It's a violent sport, one of the most violent, if not the most violent sport there is. So I totally get that part. So I don't want to try to make it seem like I'm trying to make light of that. However, James Conner, big performance, and that just shows what he means to a lot of fantasy rosters as well. So in a matchup against the LA Rams, you got Trey Benson here, who also was injured, dealing with an ankle injury. Don't know the severity, but he left the week 15 game with that injury, did not play in week 16. So I don't know what his status is for week 17. But this is kind of what we were stashing Trey Benson for all year, for the moment that James Conner got injured, but he's injured himself. So available in 82% of Yahoo leagues. He's like the shot in the dark that I'd be willing to take, right? Because I think he'd be the highest upside of any of the other Arizona running back options. So I would, go big or go home is kind of how I see it with Trey Benson. If you can get, if you're in a position where you can get multiple of the Arizona running backs, then by all means, right? But Trey Benson would probably be my number one target just because of the upside that he would bring if James Conner does miss week 17. If Trey Benson also misses week 17, then we can go to Arizona running back Michael Carter. Michael Carter currently on the practice squad. He was reverted back to the practice squad. He was called up prior to the game. Seeing how the Arizona Cardinals had injuries at the running back position, but Carter was on the practice squad, moved back to the practice squad, and he played 25 of 70 offensive snaps. Again, most of that came with the injury to James Conner. He had 5 carries for 18 yards and 5 receptions, a team high 5 receptions for 30 receiving yards. So, it seems like if Connor can't go and Trey Benson can't go, it would be Michael Carter, probably in. Oh, he's also available on 100% of Yahoo leagues. Probably should have said that. But Michael Carter in some sort of a committee with what I would think would be DJ Dallas, available in 100% of Yahoo leagues. Now, Dallas didn't see much of any opportunities. He had a 1-yard touchdown reception on 1 target. But, is that a matter of there wasn't enough time in the game to adjust to getting Dallas more work and more touches? Or was that a matter of, hey, we're James Conner got injured. We're kind of getting our butts kicked by Carolina. Let's try to, speed up, hurry up, and, get into a 2-minute offense, a passing offense. And that's Michael Carter's strength. So let's do that. Keep that in the back of your mind that it's possible that DJ Dallas could get some opportunities. Now, some guys that I hadn't prepped to talk about, but I will talk about, is these Green Bay running backs, right? Because Josh Jacobs was on his way to what looked like a fantasy game of the century, right? I mean, he had, I think, 19 and a half PPR points by halftime, right? He was just absolutely crushing the New Orleans Saints, and 13 carries, 69 rushing yards, a touchdown, 4 receptions for 38 receiving yards. Yeah, he had 20.7 PPR points. and all of that came in the first half. Most of that came in the first half. So if you are, playing, if you needed a big game from Josh Jacobs, you got that in about a half. If you needed an even bigger game, then I'm sorry that you didn't get that. But um, if Josh Jacobs scored you 20.7 points and you needed 30, I'm pretty sure you could look at your roster and there's a strong chance Josh Jacobs not scoring 30 points wasn't the reason you lost. But, I could understand the pain of some folks, for sure. However, Josh Jacobs didn't play the rest of that game. They said it was because of rest, right? And you watch the game, it totally makes sense, right? Like they're dominating the Saints. The Saints never really looked like they were in the game. Once they were up 21-0 at the half, the final score was 34-0. The Saints offense couldn't do anything, and they couldn't stop. The Saints defense couldn't stop the Green Bay Packers rushing offense. So it's definitely possible that Josh Jacobs is completely healthy, is completely okay, and they really just wanted to rest him going into a Week 18 matchup against a Week 17 matchup against Minnesota and trying to save, their workhorse running back for down the stretch in more important games. But in the event that that is not the case, in the event that, because we know NFL coaches lie, in the event that there is some sort of injury to Josh Jacobs that they didn't disclose mid-game and they are maybe going to wait to disclose it. They're going to wait to disclose it, later in this week as we get through the practice week, sort of gamesmanship for Minnesota. Um, Emmanuel Wilson is rostered he's available in 97% of Yahoo leagues. So he's probably worth a look, as is Chris Brooks, right? And I'm not saying to go out and spend all your fab on these guys, right? There is no injury. Chris Brooks available in 100% of Yahoo leagues. Wilson will be my first target. Brooks will be my second. But if I'm the Josh Jacobs manager, I'm just going to pick these guys up just in case, like just in case there's something going on that the Packers are not being open about at this point in time. And if I'm playing the Josh Jacobs manager, maybe I pick one of these guys up just to get in the Josh Jacobs manager's head. Because now they're going to be looking up Josh Jacobs' injury, Googling it every 5 minutes, and not focused on, maybe my defense, maybe I should swap out this defense. Maybe I should go with a different tight end, or maybe I shouldn't start this wide receiver that I've been starting for 6 weeks, and maybe I should start this other guy, right? Let's get them thinking about something else. So it's just, just something to think about for you, not for them, for you. But if you are the Josh Jacobs manager, seriously, I would consider rostering like an Emmanuel Wilson just in case, right? It could be nothing. He could be totally healthy, but just in case. All right, let's move on to the wide receiver position. And I don't know why this guy is not rostered in more leagues, but Jalen McMillan, Tampa Bay wide receiver, available in 55% of Yahoo leagues. And that makes 3 straight weeks with a touchdown and double-digit PPR points for Jalen McMillan. He's clearly earned the trust of Baker Mayfield with 20 targets for 16 receptions, 191 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns over his last 3 games. And with a matchup on deck against Carolina, I think we need to get McMillan in our lineups for the fantasy finals if we have not already. That's all I can really say about McMillan here. And now we start to get dirty. Washington wide receiver Olamide Zaccheaus, available in 100% of Yahoo leagues. Now, why are we picking up Olamide Zaccheaus? Well, he had himself a day on Sunday, catching 5 of 8 targets for 70 receiving yards and 2 touchdown receptions. Jaden Daniels, one of the hottest quarterbacks in football right now, and we need to get attached to that if possible, right? So not everyone can pick up a Terry McLaurin. We can't do that at this point in time. And if you play in a league where you can, you should probably get out of it unless it's a eliminator league or guillotine league or whatever. But Zaccheaus finds himself here in a great spot this week against an Atlanta defense that's been one to target with opposing wide receivers pretty much all year. and also happens to be a revenge game for Olamide Zaccheaus, who just had a revenge game against Philadelphia. So right now, he's got a 100% hit rate in revenge games. So, I mean, hashtag analytics. Let's move on to this next player, and this is a shot in the dark. But Hollywood Brown, Kansas City wide receiver Hollywood Brown, available in 68% of Yahoo leagues, saw 8 targets on Saturday on just 14 snaps. Absolutely wild usage there in Brown's first game back. We'll see. Will he see similar usage in his second game? I'm not sure, but if you need some help at wide receiver and you can't get to these other 2 guys I mentioned, Brown is definitely worth a look against a Pittsburgh defense that's been susceptible to allowing production to opposing wide receivers. Okay, that's all I got at receiver. Let's move on to tight end. And let's talk about Tennessee tight end Chig Okonkwo, baby, available in 93% of Yahoo leagues. My freaking guy right now. Yes, I'm talking like a man or a person who started Chig Okonkwo in their semifinals week, and it feels freaking awesome. He's been so inconsistent throughout his career, but 21 targets in the last 2 weeks from Mason Rudolph. That's great. That's fantastic. Fresh off the tight end 2 finish where he caught 9 of 11 targets for 81 receiving yards and a 2-point conversion. He's got another really good matchup here against a Jacksonville defense that's allowed at least 17.1 PPR points to opposing tight ends in 2 of their last 4 games. Yeah, Chiggy is a thing. He will be a thing as long as Mason Rudolph is under center. I'm sure of it. So, especially these matchups, he's been on a string of really, really, really good matchups, right? I mean, he had Cincinnati, he had Indianapolis, and now this matchup here against Jacksonville, like chef's kiss. Speaking of Jacksonville, let's talk about Jacksonville tight end Brenton Strange, available in 67% of Yahoo leagues. What a flop by Brenton Strange. Really, what a flop. I'm willing to give him another shot, though, this week against Tennessee, although Chig would be my primary target at the position this week if I do need a tight end. K. Dotton is somebody I don't. Can you trust him this week? I don't know. I've been rostering K. Dotton pretty much all year in one of my more important leagues, and made the decision last week to bench K. Dotton for Stone Smart. That worked out, and then this week I had decided to go with Chig. And dropped K. Dotton because will he play this week against Carolina? Not really sure. But Chig Okonkwo is, my primary target for sure. Brenton Strange, close second. I don't, because does a 12 target game go away? I mean, yeah, it does, but I don't know. I'd be willing to bet that happens again. Not the 12 targets, but something closer to that. All right, let's move on to defensive special teams, right? We've been doing pretty good in this spot the last few weeks. Just want to check what happened last night because going into last night, yeah. So last week we gave out 3 defenses for defensive streams. 3 of them rostered in are available in greater than 50% of Yahoo leagues. They finished as defense 1, defense 2, and defense 3. It's a pretty good week. So let's see if we can replicate that. I don't know if we can replicate that. It'd be pretty hard to do. However, this 2 weeks in a row that we've been pretty solid with the defensive streams. So let's keep it going this week. I've got a list of teams, right? And because there's not a lot of great options, a lot like some of the best options, those teams are rostered already. So, they don't call them streams for nothing, but let's see what we can do. Indianapolis defense and special teams available in 53% of Yahoo leagues, 7.5-point favorites on the road against the New York Giants offense that poor offensive line. So Drew Lock, if he does play, let's play against him. If he doesn't play, it's Tommy DeVito. If Tommy DeVito doesn't play, it's Tim Boyle. So yeah, Brian Daboll has an embarrassment of riches to choose from at the quarterback position. I'm obviously being sarcastic there. So Indianapolis defense. I sometimes don't like playing a bad defense, but 7.5 point favorites, I like that, right? Miami defensive special teams, 6.5 point favorites on the road against Cleveland, that just allowed defensive overall defense number two and a bunch of fantasy points to Cincinnati. Plus, Miami has actually been a solid defense for this back half of the year. So 7.5 point favorites or 6.5 point favorites, I actually like that quite a bit for the Miami Dolphins. Next up, Tampa Bay defense and special teams, available in 56% of Yahoo leagues, 7.5 point favorites at home. And of all the defenses that are available in 50% of Yahoo leagues, they are the largest home favorites, right? Like favorites at home usually make for a good recipe for a streaming defense. So Tampa Bay fits that bill, right? We like to target large favorites, but if we can get large favorites at home, that usually works, to our advantage here. I mean, look at what Atlanta's done the last 2 weeks, as being large favorites at home. Look what Green Bay did last night, 14.5 favorites at home. So yeah, Tampa Bay, look what Green Bay did last night. And Tampa Bay in a good spot here, 7.5 point favorites at home against kind of a red hot Carolina team, but besides the point. Seattle defense special teams, available in 81% of Yahoo leagues, 3.5 point favorites on the road. Now, I find in a lot of my leagues that, Tampa Bay, Miami, Indianapolis, not available. Seattle was available though. And I sneakily like them. I don't know if that's because I've talked myself into liking them, but 3.5 point favorites on the road, that's still good. They've been a solid defense. They've performed well against poor offenses. Caleb Williams and company, they've been a poor offense, but they've also kind of been better, especially in the sack department, as that's been an Achilles heel for Caleb Williams and the Chicago offense. However, Caleb Williams hasn't really turned the ball over, so that's something that we're not really getting from them. So it would really be sacks and sack fumbles that we would kind of really be looking at, and maybe we get an interception here, but Seattle definitely a defense that's in a good spot. Next up, the LA Chargers defense and special teams, 5.5 point favorites on the road. This one scares me just a little bit, as I feel like historically this is a spot the Chargers tend to struggle in, traveling east to Foxborough in December. But this has been a good defense for most of the year. So 56% rostered or available, 5.5 point favorites. That's definitely a good formula to go after. Next up is the New Orleans Saints. This one I have much less confidence in. Available in 59% of Yahoo leagues, 2.5 point favorites at home. The only other home favorites on this list. Las Vegas has been an offense allowing production of defensive special teams recently, but not sure how much of that has to do with like the Desmond Ridder effect. However, Vegas, and I mean the sports books, they see New Orleans as a favorite in this game, so that should count for something, right? If you just close, if you didn't know anything about these teams and I just gave you like, hey, this team's a 2.5 point favorite at home, you would blindly take the defense and happily stick them in your lineup. However, after watching New Orleans play yesterday against a good offense, right, it makes you wonder if that's something that you want to do. However, watch that New Orleans offense and say, yeah, I want to play against that offense, and that would be the Las Vegas Raiders defense and special teams, available in 90% of Yahoo leagues. 2.5 point underdogs, well, now 1.5 point underdogs on the road, the only dogs on this list. But hey, we've been trying to go up against New Orleans for 3 straight weeks. Against Washington, it was okay. Against Green Bay, it was significantly better. And Spencer Rattler tends to give up sacks. He fumbles the ball. He throws some interceptions as well. So I'm on board playing Las Vegas. They have a nice floor here against New Orleans, right? New Orleans and the Las Vegas defense has actually not been terrible, right? I mean, you look at what they did last week against Jacksonville, and I guess I know it was Jacksonville, but the week before what they did against Atlanta, and yes, I know it was Atlanta and Kirk Cousins, and I know they're playing without Max Crosby, but I think when you consider all of that, and then you consider on this side, like, hey, they're playing Spencer Rattler, like, yeah, I would love to play Las Vegas. Um, so that's one of the decisions I have to make in one of my leagues, Las Vegas or Seattle. So I have some time to make that decision. Actually, not a whole lot of time because Seattle plays on Thursday night. That's all I have for the defensive streams. What I do want to get into a little bit, just a little bit of time here, is that pay attention to the schedule right this week. We got games on Wednesday, we got games on Thursday, we got games on Saturday, games on Sunday, and a game on Monday, right? So it's like literally 5 days this week where there's a football game. So pay attention to your lineups. You might have to adjust your routine a little bit. Maybe you usually don't look until Thursday, but this is going to be a weird week in terms of I don't think we've done this since COVID, where it's like you're going to put in waivers tonight that are going to process tomorrow, and then you're going to wake up on Wednesday and like play players, right? And have to adjust your lineup, right? And just remember those Wednesday players, get them out of your flex spot, put them in a position spot. If you're playing super flex, right? Same thing there too, right? Put your quarterback, the first quarterback that's playing in the quarterback slot. So just in case like your second quarterback gets injured, you're not locked into having to play a quarterback, right? So just be mindful of these things, especially with this weird week, right? So Wednesday, Thursday, we have a game. Wednesday, we have two games. We have a game on Thursday, and then we have two games on Saturday, and then a bunch of games on Sunday, and then one on Monday. So just be mindful of that. And yeah, that is all I have for the waiver show today. Good luck on waivers. The next time I'll talk to you guys in this form or fashion will be Friday. I will still drop, Thursday night picks. It's going to be a little weird Thursday night picks. Might throw in some of the Wednesday games for some sports betting, but that'll drop Christmas Day. So be on the lookout for that on the socials. At the real Jon Jeune _FF at FF Diagnostics. But Friday will be the Week 17 matchup show. So we'll be breaking that down Friday morning, 7 a.m. Eastern. And so if I don't talk to you guys between then, have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever, however you may be celebrating. Just make sure to spend time with family and the loved ones, people that you love and care about, but also love and care about you. So have a good one, y'all. Talk to y'all on Friday, and peace.